The Joe Rogan Experience.
What do you think the UFO phenomenon is?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, that there are a lot of different varieties of it. But when we look at, like we were looking at the Francis of Assisi and the kind of historical things and the abductions and things like that, I think that it's been around for a long time, and that these are things that are in communication with us. So I used what I do in my book, both the books that I wrote about this, is I talk to people who I think represent thousands of people. So each person in the book represents thousands, if not more, maybe many thousands of people who have had experiences and the ways in which they interpret them. So all of the people seem to have had experiences where now what they want to do is they actually want to work for justice in different ways. Like Jose, the veteran in my book, he's working with young people and helping them deal with being addicted to social media and things like that, and helping them get through life, which is really hard right now. And that's what he's doing. And then you look at Dr. Whiteley, right? So she's working in the Space Force. She's trying to, help people deal with the fact that they're seeing things that, that could down planes and things like that. And she's helping people talk about that. She's helping people. Each person is somehow doing what I'm suggesting that I think is an out, this kind of structural injustice that we see. So I think that this is a transformational thing without the drugs, is what's going on. Like some kind of massive experience that people are having, and now it's getting out, and people are being able to talk to each other through Reddit communities and, different types of social media. So it is, we did see, religions when they become viral at one point. We've never seen it in an age where we have digital technology, but this is what we're seeing now.
What do you think the physical objects are?
Well, okay, so this is something that's very interesting. We just looked at the Shroud of Turin. I believe that there are these, I would call them, and this is just my own non-scientific term, interdimensional objects. They're objects that have characteristics of our dimension and some other dimension.
So some other dimension has the capability, or something from some other dimension has the capability of transporting a physical object into our realm.
Or even imprinting onto a physical object. Yeah.
How so?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think
What
that's
do you mean
what.
By, what does that mean, imprinting onto a
So
physical
with the Shroud
object?
of Turin,
Okay.
we see the imprint of, the image and.
If it's real.
Yeah, if it's real. But it's an anomalous object. So we do have, from Gary Nolan, engineered objects that we don't know how they're engineered, but they definitely look like they're, it's off planet. I would call the kinds of things that we see in the historical record interdimensional types of things. Now, how? I don't know, Joe. Okay, so I just don't know. But I do think that scientists in the government know that these things exist, and they would like to figure it out. And so part of disclosure, the disclosure movement, is outsourcing this and trying to get as many people as possible to help in figuring it out.
What do you think when they use the term donations? What do you think the purpose of that is? If there is an object that is purposely released into our, like I'm sure you're aware of cargo cults, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So with cargo cults, for people that don't know, there's been some islands during World War I and World War II where planes landed there and they left, and these people, they created these statues of these planes, and they worshiped them, and they
wanted them to come back.
Yes,
yeah, because they got food and all kinds of wonderful things from the planes.
Right, and
yeah, like they thought of them as deities.
Right, the same way we would think of something from
like
somewhere
this.
else.
Yeah. So that in my field has been called the cargo cult, the UFO cargo cult, right? And obviously Tyler and James view these parts as donate. They called it the donation site, right? So giving it the idea
Is that just one theory?
Yeah. That's just one theory.
Are there other theories that there's a biological organism that encounters a lightning storm and it actually crashes and there's physical bodies?
Oh yeah,
that
there is that. Yeah, there's that
Yeah.
going
What's your
around.
take on that? Because that's one of the things that Grush talked about and some of the other people talked about, that there are biological things that have been recovered.
Well, what impressed me about what he said was that he used the term biologics. And I actually know that term because that's the same term that Tyler was talking about when he was creating materials in anti-gravity spaces on space shuttles and such. So I was wondering, because David Grush does get his information from people allegedly in the programs, but he's never seen these materials that I know of.
I think he has some firsthand experience that he was not able to talk about.
Okay.
That he's alluding to.
Okay.
I think, but this
Yeah.
this is recent, and he's been very careful about how he releases this information and what he's able to release and not able to release. And
Right.
that I was like, okay,
Yeah,
really?
so I mean, I've not seen any bodies, nor have I seen intact craft, but I also have had. Now, remember, I don't have a clearance like he has, so I can actually talk about what people have told me. I have had people tell me that, yes, Diana, there are intact craft. I don't know. I mean, maybe. So I don't know, Joe.
Have you studied Bob Lazar?
Okay, yes, I am always asked about Bob Lazar.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but I can tell you that people that I've met who are associated with the programs tell me that he's right. Now I know his background and I know, all the things. I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but I can also say that a lot of times people with very disturbing backgrounds, who could be easily discredited, are given information and shown things and told things.
Well, I would think that that's sort of like a little escape clause.
Yeah, I think so. I think it is.
I mean, the guy's obviously a genius and was obviously a propulsion expert. He put a fucking jet engine on a Honda in like the 1980s. He's a
I know.
fascinating guy.
Yeah, yeah.
And, he claims that there's some element that exists in other places in the universe, which leads me to believe, not even to believe, but so here's the question. Are some of these things from other planets? Is that also in the equation? I mean, just because something is traveling interdimensionally, we do know that there are an infinite number of planets in the universe. I mean, we have no idea how many of them are capable of supporting human-like life or some other kind of life or an infinite number of varieties of life. And if that life can do what we've done and get to some part of its progression where it's capable of creating what we're calling artificial intelligence or super advanced technology, why wouldn't it come here?
Yes, I'm not discounting ET.
So that could be there too.
I think so, especially because of the ways in which the materials are being manufactured off planet, like the ones that we just saw. And that was information when I met Tyler 2014, and now it's a full-on thing that's happening, right? So it's a supercharged program of creating things that will help us off planet. I mean, certainly then, yeah, I think so. I mean, but I don't know.
Right.
So I have to just be honest.
So it might be a bunch of different things happening all at the same time, interdimensionally, extraterrestrially, something from a distant galaxy that's figured out some new method of propulsion that's beyond our imagination that can visit, and then also things that are coming here from other dimensions.
Yes. And even recently, somebody had, I can't say anything. I can't say I'm sorry. I don't want to be that person that goes on your show and says,
it's
"Oh,
okay.
I can't say that." But
understand.
I probably, most likely there are if there's crash retrieval crash retrievals here on Earth, perhaps there are in space as well.
Do you, when they talk about inventions that emerged post-Roswell. That's one of the points of speculation, is that we have back-engineered something, and that this led to the creation of fiber optics and a lot of other technologies that seem to emerge after that time.
Yeah. So this question was prominent in my mind in 2012 when I met Jacques Vallée. So I was already aware of his work, even as a person who hadn't studied UFOs or even believed in them. Jacques Vallée is just one of these people, right, that you come across his work and he's fascinating. So I thought it was strange that not only was he a person who was, pre-engineered ARPANET, right? He was on ARPANET, which is pre-internet. He was creating that at the same time as being obsessed with UFOs and being a ufologist. These things seemed that they had to be together, right? There was something that, what's going on here? So, and I'm in touch with him often. And he says a lot of things that are rather cryptic, but sometimes I ask him specifically, was what you were doing on ARPANET related to back-engineered UFO parts? And then he'd say something like, there are many secrets in Silicon Valley, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, he's real cryptic. He's kind of difficult to have a conversation with publicly.
Well, it does have a lot. I guess there are lots of secrets in Silicon Valley.
Of course.
Which is where he lives.
Yeah. Another thing that was really fascinating about your book was you were talking about how much religion he studied.
Yes. That was really interesting. So in the book, what I do is I uncover not just him, but Alan Hynek. They were friends. And they were both Rosicrucians, which is a form of, he might not like me to say this, but it's a form of mystical Christianity in a sense. But a lot of Rosicrucians don't view their roots as Christian. They look at it as Egyptian. But it's an esoteric tradition, and it involves meditation. I think it most likely involves this thing that you and I have been discussing in the whole talk so far is the pineal gland thing, the access point, because both of them believe in this kind of life, this meditating and things like that. And so I included references. Everything I say in my books, by the way, I pass to the person that I'm writing the chapter about. So everything that I said about Jacques, I gave it to him beforehand, and I said, are you okay with me saying this publicly? And so it passed all the tests. And I also talk about going to his apartment and seeing his library, which is an amazing library. And he has stained glass from Chartres Cathedral. And Chartres Cathedral is a special place for Rosicrucians, like a special place of presence of the sacred. And he actually did those himself. So he learned how to do stained glass from people at Chartres, by the way. And yeah, just amazing. And he had a lot of books on angels and fallen angels in that library, like almost like it was almost like going into the Vatican archive, going into this place, because these looked like first editions or close. So, really, really old books about this topic.
Fallen angel.
Yeah. I was pretty shocked when I went. We were going to have lunch and talk about the crash site and maybe talk about, what I learned from Tyler and that kind of thing. And we went to lunch, and then he said, do you want to see the library? And I was like, yes, of course. So I saw the handwritten documents from Project Blue Book. And that was just going into the library. That wasn't actually in the library. Then when we got in there, I noticed big bookcases of these books. And of course I was drawn to them. And he said, he picked out one and he opened it and it was about angels. And he said, this is a book about angels. And I could see that. And I was looking at it. I was like, wow. And then I looked at the other bookshelf, and that bookshelf was just as impressive. And then it was about fallen angels. He said, oh, this one's about fallen angels. And then he made a joke. And he said, you can't have one without the other. And I thought that was really interesting.
That does seem to align with what we're talking about, with like the struggle of good and evil.
It does. That's what he said too. And I was actually shocked at that point. I was like, wow. So just, I'm a professor of religion, so I'm like, yeah. I'm right about, my intuition was somehow confirmed.
And by the way, I think people, I think this should be. I'm not sure if this is totally true, but I believe he was the inspiration for the French character in Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.